Okay, so this is exactly what I just told you, but in text, for those of you who prefer to read it. So there's lots of time for questions. My overview is not going to take that long, so hopefully you will be thinking about questions as we go along. So the EGMiM program, so first of all, let me just say it's not EGMiM. This is a little debate we had when we first named the program. It's the Executive Global Masters in Management, which is EGMiM, and then some people started calling it EGMiM, but the person who was the program manager at the time said, no, we cannot, that just sounds silly. So it's EGMiM. This was created this was LSE's flagship, well, not just flagship, but the very first executive master's program. And we designed it to be similar to our flagship Masters in Management program. Now, most Masters in Management programs these days are only 1 year. But back then, this was in 2010, we hit the market with a 2-year Masters in Management program. And the idea here, and this is the idea behind EGMiM as well, is we are different from an MBA. So EGMiM is different from an MBA. And in the following sense. So I always use this saying, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Okay, so aside from the fact that it's only talking about men, it sounds really awkward if you say teach a person to fish, but anyway. The idea is if you're doing an MBA, you're given a fish, you're given a framework that you can apply right away, but it goes out of date after a while. If you do our Masters in Management, what you're learning is how to fish. In other words, you're learning the theory behind the frameworks. You're learning the research that leads to the theory that leads to the framework. You're learning to read original research and criticize original research. So just like the difference between being given a fish and learning how to fish, being given a fish, yep, it's immediate, a bit more passive, not quite as much hard work. Learning how to fish, it can be hard. Like it can be exhausting. There will be times in the program where you go, why am I doing this? Why am I reading all of this original research that's really dry and difficult to read? Well, the point is that you're building skills that will last you for a lifetime. And that's the idea, is that you will be a critical thinker who, even though the framework that you're using today goes out of date, 10 years from now, when a new framework comes out, some new leadership theory, some new whatever trendy thing, you can look at the original research and analyze it and go, actually, this doesn't make sense because of the way they did it, or this methodology is pretty questionable, or, you can actually be the critical thinker. And that's the value here and this is why, we call it the intelligent alternative to an MBA, which is, a nice little tagline, but that's the whole idea here. It's also, we could say, rigorous alternative, a more challenging alternative, a more academic alternative. But academic doesn't mean not practical, because ultimately the skills that you're learning will make you a critical thinker, which will be valuable for you as a manager and valuable to your organizations. I mean, the world is changing so quickly that how can we give you a framework now that's still going to be relevant in 5 to 10 years? Okay, so that's the idea here. This is the alternative. The student profile is really interesting in that we tend to have a higher percentage of women than the typical MBA or MBA program. At one point, we actually had 50-50. I think it might have been 52%. And we got really, really excited. And we were like, wow, we're going to be 50-50 from now on. But no, we weren't. Then we dropped back down to, it's about 40 to 45% typically. We've never dropped below 40, I don't think. Now here you see 26 nationalities. That doesn't sound like a lot unless you realize that we're actually talking about a relatively small group. So that's 26 nationalities out of probably about 35 people. So this is a very typical LSE profile, which any course that you take at the LSE is extremely internationally diverse. We attract, you can probably tell I'm from the United States. American universities will say, oh, we're so international. And when you look at the numbers, it's got like 15% international students. It's like, yeah, well, okay, maybe you think that's international. At LSE, it's like 80% international students. People come to the LSE and they're like, where are all the British people? But the benefit is that it's people from all over the world. And so essentially when you're doing group work, because all of our courses have group work, you're essentially learning intercultural, cross-cultural communication. That is what you're learning every day as a student at LSE. So we have a very international profile. We also have a very diverse profile on EGMiM. So whereas oftentimes in an MBA or an MBA, you'll see mostly people, I don't know, from finance or, from certain backgrounds. On EGMiM, we attract not only national diversity, but diversity in terms of industry. So if I think about some of the more interesting students we had one person who was a professional singer. We had 2 dentists. We had an airline pilot. And then of course you get your usual, people who are working in consulting or finance or working in manufacturing, a lot of people in family companies, family businesses, that sort of thing. So a really diverse range of industries as well. And you can see the age range is quite broad. So we do only take people who have a few years of work experience, but some people have a lot of work experience. I mean, we don't have many people who are 60 years old. That's a bit rare, but the vast majority are in their mid to late 30s, something like that. Now, when you take the EGMiM program, people come with a lot of different goals. So some people don't necessarily want to leave their company, they just want to accelerate within the company. And we've had students who, by doing EGMiM, their company now viewed them as leadership material and their career accelerated. We have other students who wanted to change industries, other students who wanted to stay in the same industry but change companies. So there are a lot of different objectives for students who join EGMiM. And as I said, we also do get a lot of students from family businesses. So they're not planning to leave the family business. They're just ratcheting up their skills so they can contribute more. So regardless of what your goal is, I think you will probably find alumni within EGMiM who have had a similar goal and who have found that this is helpful in their career. So let me tell you one story I remember about someone who took EGMiM, and he wasn't planning to leave his company. He actually just wanted to, he was an HR professional, human resources professional, and he just wanted to broaden his horizons. He wanted to understand the rest of the business, outside of human resources. And this was probably after the first 2 modules, so he wasn't even halfway through EGMiM. He was asked to speak on a panel of HR professionals, and he was talking about the organization and HR, and he was using some stuff that he had learned in one of our courses, which is called the Foundations of Management course, and I'll explain that a bit more about that later. And he was just talking about the history of the firm and where human resources came from and the role of human resources in the firm. Afterwards, someone from Coca-Cola came up to him and said, what you were talking about was really interesting. It's a different perspective. It's an interesting perspective. Are are you interested in working for us? And he was like, oh, I wasn't planning to leave my company, but he ended up becoming a very senior HR executive for Coca-Cola. He then had to interrupt his studies so that he could start his new job, and then he came back and graduated. But the idea here is, even for people who aren't planning to make a career move, oftentimes it expands your horizons so that new opportunities come up organically. So this is what the program looks like. All of the executive master's programs at LSE run on what we call a modular format. What that means is it's not, sometimes these executive programs are every Friday or every weekend. We don't do it that way because most of our students come from outside of the United Kingdom. So it wouldn't work for them to, come to campus every weekend or, evenings or things like that. So instead, it's modules, and each module is some of them are 2 weeks, most of them are 1 week long. And what that means is you come to campus. So you can see here, we've got 7 modules in total. 5 of them are on the LSE campus, 2 of them are overseas, and I will talk more about those later. But so for the ones on campus, you come to campus, and if it's a 1 week module, it will go Monday to sometimes Friday, but sometimes Saturday. If it's a 2 week module, obviously then it's over 2 weeks. You might get the Sunday off if we're really nice. And these are full days. They start 9:30 in the morning. I know some schools that like to start at 8:30. Me not being a morning person and being the program director, I did request that we don't start until 9:30. So we start at 9:30 in the morning, we finish at 5:30, and oftentimes there's some kind of evening event or speaker or something like that. So these are really, really full days. And the way students manage is they either make an agreement with their company that they get some extra time off, or they just use their vacation time to do this. It can be quite difficult because you don't want your company emailing you all the time when you have to be in class from 9:30 to 5:30. These are really intensive classes. But so it's 7 modules over 17 months, and you can see the start date there, August 21st. The very last module is in the January. And then after that module, you still have a project to work on. You still have 2 exams and a project to work on. And then once all of that is submitted and you've passed everything, then you can graduate in July. So that is the schedule. Here's the list of courses. So as you would assume, with a modular format, you come and there's a set schedule. So it's not like, if you were a full-time student, you might have some electives, you could choose from a list of courses. That's really difficult to do in a modular format. So we have a set list of courses, and this is what they are. So the Foundations of Management is a very unique course where it talks about, it's like the origin of business, essentially. Where do companies come from? Why are companies set up the way they are? Where did this human resources function come from, or accounting, or it's a really nice way of going to the kind of origin story of organizations and business in order to better understand what we have now. And the more we can understand what we have now, the more we can understand, maybe we should change things. Maybe, is this fit for the future? We don't know. I think these are always good questions to ask. But so that's the Foundations of Management, a really unique course. I don't think you'll find this at any other university. And then we've got a course called Foundations of Management 2, which is essentially an accounting course. We're not allowed to call it accounting because there is an accounting department at LSE and they don't like anyone else to teach accounting. So we call it Foundations of Management 2. But it's slightly different from what the accounting department would teach, because it's like the history of accounting. And you learn you learn the principles of financial control and governance and all that, but you also learn the history of it and you put it in this larger context. So those two courses go together. Then you've got managerial economics, organizational behavior and leadership, which is all about people management, marketing, financial management, strategy. So this comes towards the end of the course, where you can kind of think back on what you've learned up to that point. And we talk a lot about strategy and innovation, scenario planning, et cetera, things like that. And then there's another, these two courses, strategy and then the international business strategy, both come at the end of the course. International business strategy used to be called foreign direct investment. But they changed the name because it's broader than that. But the idea is that we want you to understand the international context, and it's actually a great course to teach at LSE because the students are so international that you can have this really wonderful conversation where students from the countries that you're talking about can give you their perspective. And in particular, this talks a lot about emerging markets and trying to understand emerging markets. And then the last big piece is your dissertation capstone project. And this, let me talk about this on the next slide. So this slide is essentially what I consider our USP, our unique selling point. Now, in addition to the Foundations of Management course, which I think is really unique, the things that make EGMiM kind of interesting and different are the 2 overseas modules and the dissertation/capstone project. So the 2 overseas modules, we've had various different locations in the past, including Istanbul, Singapore, Beijing. Now, for the coming years, we have Cape Town in South Africa and Bangalore in India. Now, the way we do these overseas modules is very different from the way most MBA or EMBA programs do it. We do not send you off to some other university and have them run a 1-week random course for you. And I know this is what a lot of MBA programs do because they send their students to LSE for 1 week. And they're like, hey, could you just run a 1-week program on, I don't know, international business for our students? And we're like, okay. So we don't do that. These 2 overseas modules are completely integrated with the courses that are linked to those modules. So the Cape Town module is linked to the International Business Strategy and Emerging Markets module. So you can see, South Africa, Africa, emerging market, you can see that link there. Bangalore is part of the marketing strategy module. Okay, so that the academic link is not quite so clear. The reason we go to Bangalore is because the teacher, the marketing strategy teacher, comes from southern India. And so the Bangalore trip is very much it's very much this teacher saying, welcome to India. Let me show you all of the interesting, unique things about India, all the contradictions, all the innovation, all of this stuff. And so it's very loosely linked to this idea of marketing and innovation. But it's really a kind of cultural immersion, a very unique perspective on India. Even people who have been to India before come out of that module going, wow, I never saw that side of India. Whereas the Cape Town module is very much an academic module where the teachers are teaching about international business strategy. They take you to Cape Town and they bring you to different companies that have different types of international business strategies, and they do case studies on each of those companies. And they put it within the context of an emerging market. So those are the 2 overseas modules. The dissertation capstone is a great opportunity because in this course, I said, there are no electives. You can't choose the courses that you want to do. So the dissertation capstone is your chance to specialize in something that we don't offer. So let's say you want to specialize in, I don't know, social entrepreneurship. Well, do your dissertation on it, because that will then make you an expert. The dissertation counts, the credit that you get for the dissertation in terms of course credit is as much as any one of your other courses, which means you're expected to spend as much time on this independent project as you do on any one of the other courses. So what students do is they choose okay, let me explain the difference between a dissertation and a capstone. A dissertation is an academic research project. A capstone is an entrepreneurial idea. And so you can choose one or the other. Usually about 65% of our students choose the dissertation, which says to me that we are recruiting the right people, because we are recruiting people who want to do an academic research project. But then there are always, you know, that 35%, 30 to 35% who have an entrepreneurial idea. And why not? You know, why not use this as a chance to research it and build it up? But so if you, for this, especially for the academic dissertation, it's a chance to become an expert in something. So for example, there was one student who was working in a sales organization, and he was a sales manager, but he was really interested in moving more into the human resources side of things. And so he did his dissertation on motivation, like creativity and motivation among salespeople. And now he was an expert in the psychology behind motivation and creativity. And he was given then more of those responsibilities, where he was able to like design programs to help motivate his colleagues, et cetera. So think of this project as a way of furthering your career. There are some previous topics listed on the slide. There was one student who studied women in leadership in the UAE. This was the one I was talking about, creativity and commitment in sales organizations, exploring the impact of AI on the customer journey. You know, this is the other thing that students often use the dissertation for is if you want to move into a new industry, you do the dissertation on a topic relevant to that new industry. And as part of the dissertation, you have to gather data. And oftentimes the data that students gather is interviews. Well, here's your opportunity to expand your network in this new industry. So let's say this new industry, you want to move into technology. So let's say you're in manufacturing, you want to move into technology. So in this new industry, you identify the people, maybe you contact them on LinkedIn, you say, hey, I'm an LSE student, I'm writing a dissertation, would you be willing to talk to me? It's a great way to build your network, and maybe one of them might remember you when a job opportunity comes up. So this dissertation capstone is a really great opportunity for you to further your career and become an expert in something that you're interested in. Okay, so I am going to pause there. We've got Alex, who is our alum, who is here to answer questions. While you're preparing your questions, I wanted to ask Alex, could you just share with everyone, this is a question that we often get, is how did you manage your time between working full-time and studying on EGMiM? What did you do?
Can you hear me?
Yep. And and please introduce yourself a little bit as well.
Oh yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Constance. I'm Alex. I work for Breitling here in Switzerland. So hello from Zurich. And yeah, nice to be on this info session as well. So before joining EGMiM, I was in consulting. I was working for one of the big 4 companies in the German branch of PwC. So spent a considerable time in consulting, both in the deals area, so on mergers and acquisitions, and then also in management consulting. EGMiM helped me a lot moving into this role, which I'm now doing here at Breitling. So I wasn't in luxury at all. I wasn't in luxury watchmaking either. So EGMiM helped me really in many ways. I would say, yeah, firstly, broadening my horizons. I guess all management consultants, if there are any among you, know that we all struggle with this notion that as we work as consultants on a project that we think we know something better than others, but more often than not, we don't. And I think EGMiM helped me in many ways to really, reflect in a better way and really dig deeper in terms of where certain decisions come from in many ways. So this is one aspect. And the second aspect, Konstantin was just talking about the dissertation or the capstone. I can only say for me personally, the dissertation I was doing was really the door opener for this role I have now. Because as I was interviewing CFOs and private equity professionals, I happened to speak to Breitling's CFO and eventually ended up having a very much loose conversation about what I plan to do after finishing EGMiM, which happened to be a role, and which happened to be, for me at least, a role I wanted to pursue within private equity, in the context of private equity. And after after graduating, I ended up having this role. So in many ways, LSE and both LSE and EGMiM and this program helped me to achieve, I guess, my goal to move into a position in the industry. It's quite a senior position as well. And I guess without the LSE, it's very fair to say I wouldn't have achieved to move in such a position. So that's a brief introduction, as well as a bit of context of my background with EGMiM, and happy to take any questions you might have.
Okay, if there are no questions yet, can I ask you, Alex, to comment on any program highlights that you particularly remember?
All right, so let's start with the first one. So Foundations of Management was the first module I did. It was a highlight as such. I think you presented it very well, Konstantin, in the way the subject is taught. It's a very versatile and multidiscipline type of management approach. It's very interesting to hear where many of the I would say, disciplines of management today come from, and where they really originated and how they originated in the past, and how this is tied to how management looked like in, let's say, 100 years ago, and what this means today, and how it has evolved. For me, one of the highlights really was, because I need to say, actually, our cohort was deprived of being always on site because of COVID. So at one point we had a hybrid approach. Some people who were in London could partake on campus. Some of us were online. So for me, the highlights really were when I was on campus in terms of subjects, I would say Foundations of Management and organizational behavior. So I learned a lot about how an organization is run, what certain types of leadership can do or won't do, and where this is coming from. I think digging deep in terms of reading the theory about things helps. As I said before, we all we all think that, I guess, as seasoned professionals, that we think experience matters, and it does. But I think getting back to research and really the academic standpoint in many ways helps, again, having and developing I would say a different perspective on things, which helped me a lot, and particularly the case studies we did there. So those were the on-campus, I would say, highlights. And then for me, hybrid, one of the biggest highlights was the FDI course, so Foreign Direct Investment, with Saul Estrin, and really shout out to the program team. You have managed to show us. Actually, we were doing company visits in a virtual way, in a virtual environment. So we were all sat at home and then connected to Huawei in China and Daimler and so on. So this was really an amazing experience, along with how Saul and Christine and the team were teaching the subject. A very much practical way, very much interesting also, if I look today, how we expand a luxury brand globally. What does that mean? Which strategy, which approach do you take for which region, for which market? How does the consumer take your brand or not? All these aspects really originate in the FDI course, and this was for me one of the biggest highlights, I would say.
Great, thank you, Alex. And that just to clarify, the FDI course is now called International Business Strategy. It used to be in China, but for hopefully obvious reasons, it's quite difficult to go back into China these days. So we've moved it to South Africa, and so that's the one in Cape Town now. Okay, so are there any questions? Here, we've got a question in the chat. Alex, how does having an international cohort in your program help you in your new role?
Sorry, I was muted. So how does having an international cohort? I would say in many ways, the study groups, you will be put in study groups. Those are groups from, I don't know, 6 to 8 people, depending on the cohort size, I guess, which then again changed for the second year of study. And honestly, I think Konstantin was presenting it in one of the first charts here. There is obviously so many nationalities in the EGMiM program. And what is for me most fascinating is, one is where you come from. The other part is like what you do professionally. So I ended up in my first study group learning so much from my cohort, the whole cohort, but particularly from my study group. So I was with people who, if I remember, Rob was one of the first 10 employees at Pinterest in San Francisco. He did everything from the startup to the IPO. Then I was with people who we had Yoshan, who happened to be the private captain, the private pilot of Nelson Mandela in South Africa. So then we had a lawyer leading a law firm in Dubai. So it can't be much more versatile and really mixed in terms of the skill sets. And I guess this is where really EGMiM, and particularly I guess the LSE brand as well, attract this type of international talent. And both when you sit in the whole group and have conversations and discussions on case studies, but even more so in the study groups, you will really feel the impact EGMiM will have on your thinking, because I guess you will rarely end up in an environment as international as that.
Great. And one more for you, Alex, from Andreas. Would you also talk a bit about time management during the course?
Oof, that's a good one. So I don't know how, honestly, to be very frank, I don't know how I did it, because it was everything, COVID, then being at home, then full-time consulting role and EGMiM. So if you would ask me when I would do it again, maybe not within the context of a pandemic, but yeah, time management is I don't want to sound too cheesy to say it's crucial, but it's important that you start really doing your readings and your preparations for an assignment rather at the beginning of normally you have like 3 to 4 weeks after a module to complete an assignment. So very rarely I shouldn't say this, Constance, sorry, very rarely people do the readings before the module. So you end up reading and doing all the really preparatory work for your assignment, both individual and for the group assignment, after a module. So it's very important that you don't start on day 19 out of 21, but rather maybe on day, let's say 10, and then you will be fine. I think it's not something where you will end up not working for those 2 weeks. I think it's quite manageable, but it really requires a bit of discipline, which I personally didn't have maybe after module 1, but then I developed sort of a bit afterwards, and then in the tail end of the program, it was really good, yeah, for me at least.
Cool. And another question from Philippe. Can you elaborate a bit on what made you choose the EGMiM program compared to other more traditional MBA programs?
Yeah, 2 things. One is I also had one of these sessions, and I also happen to have many friends who did the INSEAD MBA or Oxford and many other top business schools coming from the background of management consulting particularly. And I guess as Konstantin was saying, one of the differences is really the way the program is taught and how much academic really rigor the LSE puts into this program, whereas business schools are much more, I would say, practical. Not that the LSE is not practical, but the way you apply certain things is really coming from, again, I need to say consulting, in the way of you have a problem and you try to solve a certain problem using a certain framework, but you're not maybe digging as deep as to say, where is this framework even coming from? Why does it exist? what made this framework even useful? Is this something really underpinned by, let's say, vast amount of research, or is this something really consultants or practitioners came up with? And I guess it's a very thin line between only theory and only practical examples. I think this is where the LSE EGMiM program is, for me at least, really standing out, that you're doing a lot of theory and where things are coming from, but then you really apply it in real life cases. And I think this mixture makes it a very much standout program compared to all these other MBA programs, which were much more, as I said, framework driven, and really, I don't want to sound too harsh and say lacking any academic rigor, but as you know, it's a more of an academic, it's less of an academic program, but more of a practical, what will bring me to the next job sort of program. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Shall we move on to the Hinrich Foundation?
Well, hello, everybody. I can jump on in. I'm Larry Shaw. I'm the Education Program Manager at the Foundation, and we are hoping for the opportunity to help some of you with a scholarship to move you along through your journey with LSE. So I wanted to give you a little bit of information about who we are, why we do what we do, and then how, if you're interested, you can apply for one of the 2 scholarships we offer. And then we'll hand things over to one of the current LSE students who's also one of our current scholars to give you some of his perspective. But Erica, thanks for getting those slides going. If we could move to the next slide, please. And I meant to say good evening from Singapore. Our foundation is Asia-based, but we do have a global outlook, as is international trade by nature. We are a private philanthropic organization, and we are wholly dedicated and fully passionate about advancing mutually beneficial, sustainable global trade. Next slide, please, Erica. So we were founded by a gentleman named Merle Hinrich. Mr. Hinrich is 81 years old and still comes to the office every day here in Singapore. Mr. Hinrich was born in the United States and to a farming family in Nebraska. He did not come from great financial means and was only able to attend university because of a scholarship that he received. And that is something that stayed with him through his incredibly successful career in international global trade, and something that is hardwired into his DNA to kind of pay it forward and help develop the next generation of global trade leaders. Mr. Hinrich ventured out to Asia in the mid-60s and realized that as Asian manufacturing was coming online, there weren't really great channels to connect Western buyers with all these factories that were cropping up in Asia. So he moved to Hong Kong in 1970 and founded the Asian Sources Media Group, which eventually became Global Sources Media Group, and spent 60 years facilitating global trade. And over that 6 decades in global trade, he really came to understand the power of trade, not only as a way to make money and for businesses to succeed, but as a very genuine peace-building tool between nations. And that if trade is done ethically, equitably, and sustainably, there is a rising tide lifts all ships effect. There are better opportunities on both sides if trade is done well to create jobs, new opportunities, educational opportunities, access to healthcare, access to better gender equality. And again, as I mentioned, peace between nations. It's less likely that people are going to point guns at each other if they are benefiting from trading effectively with one another. And that was really his ethos in founding his philanthropy 10 years ago, was understanding that these concepts for facilitating and sustaining global trade needed to be taught. And so he set up the Hinrich Foundation. Next slide, please, Erica. So we are built on 2 pillars. We have a trade research arm and our trade education arm. And through the kind of Venn diagram connectivity of these 2 areas that you see on the circles there, we want to build an ecosystem of trade influencers. Next slide, please. So on the education side of things, and all of our research feeds into these resources, we're trying to help employers develop work-ready talent that is going to transform trade across global value chains. And we do this through a number of tools that we've developed. We have an international trade ranking. We partnered with QS, one of the leading creators of university rankings, and last year launched the very first ranking of graduate level trade related programs. So that is something that comes out every November and can be seen at topuniversities.com or at the Hinrich Foundation website, hinrichfoundation.com. We've also created the Hinrich Trade Education Center, which is where we take all of the research from the fellows that we take on. For example, one of the gentlemen who's one of our senior trade researchers, Steve Olson, we use one of the original architects of the NAFTA agreement. He's now working for us, creating and writing white papers on all things trade related. He specifically focuses on US-China trade war. And we took these white papers, we've taken all this research, and we've created course discussion guides that we make available for free to professors around the world who are teaching about trade and economics. They're also downloadable for free by students from our website. And this is one of the ways we synergize our research with our education efforts. Another tool that we produce every year is the Sustainable Trade Index, which is a really deep dive analysis into 30 major trading economies. We look at 70 data points to analyze how those economies are faring in terms of people, planet, and profit as it relates to sustainable trade and business. Also available on our website. And then there's the reason that we're here talking to you today, which are our trade leader scholarships. And this is really wanting to give a leg up to people who share our passion for international trade, who want to deliver it and sustain it and push it forward as a tool for making the world a better place. Next slide, please. So what we do is we look for programs that, frankly, we think are awesome. So as you can tell, I'm American. So we look for awesome programs that we think really arm their students with the tools they need to be effective trade leaders. And LSE's program, the EGMiM, is hands down one of them. And this is for all the reasons you've already heard about. Critical thinking, being ready for anything. What did we learn during the pandemic? But that our entire global value chain was so much more fragile and vulnerable than anybody could have possibly thought. And everyone had to scramble to try to figure out how to untangle it, how to get things working again. And really the takeaway lesson, as we're still figuring out how to fix it, is understanding that we need to be thinking forward enough to predict what's happening next and figure out ways to overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. And without critical thinking, that doesn't happen. The diversity of the program that's been talked about, international trade by nature, we want people who are passionate about engaging the world and finding effective ways to work together. And that starts by studying together. And that starts with having experiences in different environments and different cultures. So these are the kind of reasons that we think LSE is worth supporting and why we want to support scholars there. As you can see, there's a number of schools around the world that we also support. Erica, next slide, please. So I'm not going to dwell on this because you've been given lots of details about the program, how long it is and the modular nature of it. But the scholarships that we offer, there are 2 scholarships to LSE that we offer every year. And really we want to support the individuals who are focused on making this lasting contribution to sustainable trade worldwide. Again, passionate about trade is the repeated mantra of our organization. Next slide, please. One of the many benefits of the scholarship, in addition to the financial support, is in addition to everything you will get as an alumni of LSE for the rest of your careers, is you also become a member of the Hinrich Foundation Alumni Association, which is a collection right now of about 300 scholars that we've supported across various institutions around the world that we bring together and support with career advice and opportunities, continued education, networking events. We're actually preparing to have about 200 of our scholars over the years converge on Singapore in October for a Global Connect event. We've been waiting to do this for years. The pandemic kind of hampered us, to create an opportunity for everyone to come together across industries, across nationalities, across disciplines, to network with each other, to strengthen their knowledge base. And we would love to have like-minded, interested people, join the Alumni Association as our scholars. Next slide, please. So I wanted to just put up some pictures of some of our former and current scholars, just to kind of show the diversity. The scholars who apply for this program, who obviously have been accepted to LSE, come from all corners of the planet, whether that's Europe, South America, Asia, the United States, Africa. And again, this adds to the richness and diversity of the tapestry of our alumni that our scholars have access to. And we're really fortunate that one of our current scholars, David Lin, is with us on the call today. And I wanted to turn things over to him, rather than make you listen to me drone on about things, to share his experience with the LSE program and his experience as a Hinrich Foundation scholar. So David, I will hand things over to you, please. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Larry. And thanks everyone for inviting me for this info session. So just, a quick background. I think Larry talked a little bit, and it's probably on the slide. As you can tell from my accent, I'm American, but I was born in Taiwan, and I've actually been based in Asia for the last 15 years. And so in terms of jobs, I'm actually currently based in Shanghai. I'm the head of strategy for marketing at Apple across Greater China. And so essentially, I've kind of spent essentially all my career focusing on the Greater China region, mainland China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau. And so one of the kind of, I think questions I got a lot of when I was applying for this program is like, why are you going back to school? Like, this sounds crazy. You're midway through your career, you have quite a demanding job. Like, why are you doing this? And one of the things that I told Larry before in our kind of conversations leading up to this was, I was very curious as I had moved from kind of creative agencies onto, a very large multinational corporation, about the disciplines beyond what I was a specialist in. And one of the biggest questions I had for myself was, is kind of marketing the end of the line for me in terms of my career? And is there something out there that could, force me to broaden that kind of horizon a bit more? And so I did look at a couple of schools at that period of time. And finally, when I came across the LSE program, I actually had been looking at it for a couple of years. And with, its obvious reputation, it's a really strong kind of network in Asia. And in addition, I saw that the Hinrich Foundation, which was Asia-based, was a close partner with the LSE. It felt almost like the stars aligned, and it was, the kind of perfect program for me. And so I had gone through the application, I think, early last year, and then throughout that whole process, meeting Hinrich and obviously the group at LSE. It has been quite a bit of a whirlwind, as you may imagine. And so, yeah, so for the last 6 months, it's been great. Unfortunately, I had to do my first module in online because the very intense kind of lockdown restrictions in China, but it's been really good to be in person in London for the second module, and then most recently, which I'm still getting over the jet lag from, of module 3 here. So it's been really great. I think Alex talked about this earlier. I mean, in many ways, the LSE lives up to, I think its reputation in every way possible. I'm not just saying that because Constan's on the call, but I was generally impressed, I think, about the quality of the professors. The coursework is extremely intense, especially if you're balancing a job with all the readings and all the works that need to go. But in many ways, it's kind of what you're looking for and paying for when you're signing up for a program like this. To give a really good example, we had just finished the finance module, and for someone who has literally no finance background whatsoever, I was obviously able to learn quite a bit within that module, and also get your hands on different types of finance tools that are being used by professionals. But what was actually more impressive was after class, when we were having a pint with our classmates at the George, even the finance professionals who are 10, 15 years in the finance industry are learning new things as well. And they were actually extremely impressed and stimulated in terms of some of the coursework that was happening within that space. And so that has really been a really big not just learning, but it's like a shift in terms of, I think, how all of us in the program think. And I think it really does pay off to what Constant kind of mentioned earlier of kind of LSE's model, right? So it's the ideas about understanding the cause of things and not just taking application and using those applications in your everyday life, but actually learning why these disciplines exist, it does provide a completely different perspective. And it's something that I can wholeheartedly say that I'm actually already applying into everyday work. And so stuff I've learned from managerial economics, we're building into models within the strategy group and data science group at Apple. And there's just a lot of really fruitful, applicable knowledge that you learn in the classroom and also your classmates. And so fortunately, I'm kind of, I think, the first cohort that is coming out of the COVID craze. And so maybe everyone is, extremely kind of socially craved, but, having the ability to spend time with their classmates in and out of the classroom has been really, really amazing. And what I think kind of on the last note is, if anyone really is Asia based and you're looking to, look at progress in your career within this region, obviously for me, I believe it's the most exciting, region in the world. I think this is really the best program because one, you have the reputation of LSE, you have the partnership with Hinrich and the entire kind of global trade community within this region. And for me, in the interactions I've had with the classmates at school or even people within the Hinrich organization, it just really broadens that network of knowledge sharing. And so I'm halfway through this. I'm going through all the struggles that Alex mentioned earlier. But up to this point, I have not regretted 1 second of this. And I think if any of you are kind of on the cusp of doing this, I would say take that leap because it's definitely worth it. And so yeah, that's my quick kind of 5 minutes, but happy to again answer any questions or give any kind of comments if you have any.
David, thanks so much. I think before we jump into any questions folks have for you, I'd just like to go over just the nuts and bolts with folks who are interested in applying for our Trade Leader Scholarship. And it starts with actually the definition of trade for us, which is quite broad. Once you learn how to fish, if you're interested in continuing to catch fish, shipping those fish from point A to point B, marketing those fish, developing the equipment to catch more fish, or full on just selling the fish, that is global trade if it's happening across borders. So if any of that excites you, we want to hear from you. We want to support you. Now, in general, we're looking for applicants with about 5 years of work experience in global trade. But the caveat there is if you demonstrate a really strong interest in pursuing a trade career and have that come through your essay and through the interview process, 5 years is a guideline. So, please don't let that fully inhibit you from applying. And in general, we are looking for people who are motivated to spend at least part of their career working in Asia after they graduate in an international trade related sector, or if you're in another part of the world doing business over in Asia from that part of the world, that qualifies too. Now, these are 2 scholarships. They're partial. They're £21,000 each. And obviously that covers not only your study in London, but we are huge proponents of spending time on the ground in other countries and cultures, and love that you would have the opportunity just to explore Cape Town and Bangalore. They are both amazing, amazing cities if you have the opportunity to go. For the August 23 cohort, applications are open until the 15th of June. And I'm going to post this link in the chat, but you apply via the LSE website at that address, which again, I'll post in the chat. And if you have any questions at all, Erica, if you could go to the next slide, it has my personal email or my work email address on the final slide, larry.shaw@hinrichfoundation.com. There's also the URL for our website where all of our educational materials that are free are available and more information about the scholarships. So if you are passionate about trade, throw your hat in the ring, please apply. We would love to meet you, talk to you, and ultimately have you become part of our family as David has become. And again, thank you to LSE for letting us be a partner with such a wonderful organization. And I'm looking forward to hearing from anyone out there who's interested. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Larry. And thank you, David. So we have reached time, and Alice was going to say something about admissions, but instead she's put it in the chat. So hopefully all of you can see in the chat, there's a link to more information about admissions. Are there any final questions before we end the session? You can just put it in the chat or raise your hand.
I will just say just very quickly, because I've put our email address there, but if you have any further questions after this session, please get in touch with dom.egmim.admissions@lse.ac.uk. You can arrange a consultation with me. We can have a chat. If you want me to look over any of your documents or need any guidance on the admissions process, please get in touch, because yeah, it can be really beneficial to touch base. So yeah, dom.egmim.admissions@lse.ac.uk.
And that's, yeah, you'll see that in the chat. Great. So if there are no further questions, thank you all for coming. I think we should wrap it up here. Okay.